For more on President Trump's tax policy agenda, we welcome now Mattie Duppler. She is founder and president of Forward Strategies and a senior fellow for fiscal policy at the National Taxpayers Union. We also are still joined, of course, by our contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Zeno. So, Mattie, give us a sense, really, if there were substantial new tax cuts involving both capital gains and payroll tax, what would the effect be on the economy?
Well, that's up for debate, but an effective tax cut on the capital gains rate could flow through to other people who are not just holders of assets like stocks. I saw your piece earlier there saying that it just flows to the high income earners. Now, remember, capital gains are not just taxes paid on people who are selling stocks. You sell your home and you make a gain on that. You are owed capital gains as a result of that. The other thinking on a capital gains tax cut is that loosens up capital in the economy that flows through to other more productive uses. That's really where you would see the effect if there was a capital gains tax cut. You would allow for more capital to be unlocked, to be invested elsewhere. We saw this with the cut in the corporate tax rate. When you cut the corporate tax rate, you have more capital for corporations to use to invest in their economies here. That eventually flows down to workers and it results in an increase in wages, which we saw for the first time after the tax cut in 2017. So when you're talking about cutting the capital gains tax rate, yes, of course, the direct benefit would potentially go to people who are direct holders of assets, but the residual effects of that could be actually quite immense, depending on the amount of the capital gains tax cut, as well as the duration of it. Of course, we saw in 2001, 2003, the cut in capital gains rate was temporary at that point. Yep. Something that is just temporary in nature, people might sit on their capital a little bit longer, but something that's permanent could have a growth effect for sure.
Mattie, it's Jeannie Zeno. So when you think about small businesses, which have been so decimated by COVID-19 and the pandemic, what would you suggest that the president or Joe Biden, should he be elected, what's the first thing you think should happen to help those small businesses that have been so decimated in the pandemic and still seem to be struggling?
Well, certainly for businesses, the challenge right now is the lack of certainty. They need to know what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks and months, not even discounting the fact that we've got the coronavirus crisis still weighing heavily on small businesses. This is something that businesses always need in times of economic certainty. With the added factor of this public health uncertainty, businesses really need to know that there's going to be security there for them when they're talking about keeping their workers on payroll and looking until the end of the year. The Trump administration, of course, issued that payroll tax cut as a result of an executive order, but the devil is in the details. The question is what happens when that executive order expires, regardless of who's in the White House, because we don't know when those tax liabilities will eventually come due, and of course, who will be responsible for paying them. So I think small businesses right now would really be looking for leadership, both from Congress and from the White House, for certainty about the economic environment. There's a couple of things that were started in the CARES Act that I think could be extended that could give them that certainty, an extension of the PPP loans, more ability for businesses to claim the employee retention tax credit, that sort of thing.
Hey, Mattie, this is Rick Davis in Washington. Good to see you tonight. Speaking of fiscal policy, back to Capitol Hill. I mean, we know probably both of the candidates, regardless who's elected president, are going to have some kind of a stimulus package in the first quarter of next year. And you can imagine that'll drive most of the spending. But at some point, the economy is going to recover, we hope. And at what time does the Hill and especially our fiscal hawk Republicans start looking at these deficits and say, wait a minute, these deficits are a problem and they're going to restrain our growth and we got to do something about it?
Well, Rick, my hope is that the discussion right now offers a better landscape for both Republicans and Democrats to talk about the need for fiscal space when it comes to emergencies like this. I mean, both Republicans and Democrats have always said that the federal government certainly has a role to play in emergencies. And what we're experiencing with coronavirus, I think, certainly qualifies as an immense emergency and acute contraction in the economy, the likes of which we've never seen before. So it makes sense that the federal government has had to respond exigently to this. But I think it proves the point of fiscal conservatives who have said that we need to make sure that we are applying scrutiny to spending across the entire budget in times of normalcy, because if you don't do it, then it becomes that much more difficult to have the fiscal space to make the important decisions when times are dire like they are right now. I think it certainly makes sense for Congress to continue to respond to the coronavirus, for there to be another relief package to help those small businesses and those employers as they face so much uncertainty headed into the winter. But you're right. We need to make sure that there's enough space and conversation at the end of that to talk about having a little bit more scrutiny applied to federal spending.
Mattie, great to have you with us as always. That's Mattie Duppler. She's founder and president of Forward Strategies and senior fellow for fiscal policy at the National Taxpayers Union. Our contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Zaino are still with us, and we are now about to go back to the convention.